All right, so if you were not here last time, here's how we started with this. So I didn't finish drawing everything out on my paper, but the first thing we did was in this long rectangle, we used the technique wet on wet to start kind of a sky effect, to talk about how you can make clouds and stuff like that. So with wet on wet, the idea is that you're painting water into the section of paper first, so that way when you touch color down on the wetness, it spreads and you don't see the brush strokes of your brush in the color. To make clouds, one technique you can use is taking a paper towel and dabbing at the wet paint to soak up the color. So this is a technique that can be described as subtractive painting. I'll show you another one in a little bit once the color dries. So because I didn't finish measuring everything out on my paper, I'm going to do that now. So in this bigger rectangle that I had added below my long one, I'm going to add a door. So we're making a door in this space because it gives us a little bit more to work with as we practice with some of these painting techniques. And we're not going to get into all the really experimental type of stuff, as much as that can be really fun. We're focusing on things that are a little bit more practical for the perspective project that you guys are working on. Things that will be beneficial for you to know as you begin painting your perspective tiny house designs. So with my ruler, I've been making some marks on my paper just to get the width of the doorway, including a little bit of a door frame that goes around the door. This is because in real life you would see these things, but it's also because it's something that as I'm painting, I can use as a barrier so that I can paint the door and I can paint the wall. And they're not going to be touching each other, so they're not going to bleed into each other. And then I can come back and work on the door frame a little bit later once those two parts have dried. So I'm also adding some details to my door, just because doors are most often more than just a blank rectangle. So it's good to think about other features that you would have on a door and what you might have to do to paint those differently, which we will kind of explore a little bit later. So I'm just adding these 4 rectangular panel bits pretty much, that will have sides to them that would be kind of indented a little bit, so that when we paint them, they'll be a little bit more in shadow, while the surface of the door and the surface of the panels are about the same color. And if you're having trouble getting your lines as straight as I am, use a ruler. I'm just trying to speed myself up a little bit, so that's why I'm not using a ruler for this part. And then don't, excuse me for my voice, don't forget to add a doorknob. And then the last bit is we use these film canister containers to make circles that we're going to use for 3 other little practice bits. All right, so next we're going to do a little bit more with this wet on wet technique. It's always good to wet the color you want to use before you wet your paper so that way when you go to touch your color down, it's not like you're wasting time trying to wet the color and then the wetness on your paper dries. So I'm painting the wall area of this bigger box with water so that I can touch down a red color onto that space. And I'm using red because I want it to be like a brick color because we're going to paint bricks onto this space, and I'm going to talk about a method in which you can do this to capture detail but to not kill yourself trying to make sure you have every single brick. And as you touch the color down, you're just using a wet brush to spread that color to make it a little bit more even. And we're going to do the same thing with the door. So I'm making the door blue just because I like the idea of a blue door, and that way it kind of stands out from the red of the wall. So again, I'm painting the whole area of that door without painting the door frame, just with water, so that I can touch my blue paint down and it'll just spread within that space. In your top circle, just go ahead and paint it solidly green. We're going to use it as a space to practice with a grass type texture. And then your bottom circle, I'm just going to paint it like an orange color. So maybe paint it a similar color. We're just going to use this as a circle to practice with layering. And then once your cloud area is dry, something that you can consider is with the part where we lifted paint, you can add color onto a cloud, because if you think about it, a lot of the time when you look at the sky, clouds are reflecting light from like the sun or other atmospheric things that might be happening, like a sunset. If you have areas of paint that kind of pool and it's just sitting water and you're concerned it's going to take a long time to dry, if you take your paintbrush while it's not soaking wet, it'll start to absorb that moisture if you just hold it over the spot. So that's what I did at the bottom of the door. I know I'm moving a little faster than I'm talking. Sorry. What I'm doing right now is I am doing subtractive painting. So I'm taking a wet paintbrush and I'm kind of scrubbing at the painted surface that's dry to lift paint off of that area. It's not going to make it the exact same white of the paper, but it is going to make it a little bit lighter. It's a little bit more subtle than using the paper towel technique. But what is kind of nice about this method is it gives you a little bit more control over what you're going to get.